Chapter 4 is called Description of Data, Computing Summary Statistics. So what is a summary statistic? Well, a summary statistic is a number which summarizes some aspect of statistical data. And the most common one that people are familiar with would be the average of a set of numbers. But there are some other types of statistics that we're going to study throughout this course. So in the first one is called, I call it the measure of central tendency. And so we have measures of central tendency. And by this, I'm talking about what is the middle of the data, or what is the center of the data. And there are three basic ways to compute this, or to think of it. And of course, the most common we call the average. But in statistics, the word used for average is mean. So we can calculate the mean for a set of data and think of this as the average. And there's two others. There's the median. And the median of a set of data is sort of the middle of the data. And I'm going to need to elaborate on what that means. And there's one more that textbooks always mention. It's called the mode. And we'll talk about that briefly. And the mode sort of describes what comes up the most often. All right, so the mean or average is literally the average you're familiar with. When you take a set of numbers, you add them up, and you divide by the number of numbers to get an average. That's all it is. That's what the mean is. And that's what we're going to be focusing on almost entirely. But I want to dispense with these other two measurements. The median measurement is used in very special circumstances where there may be a distortion in the data. So let me explain. Suppose that, and this is an absurd example, but I think it illustrates it pretty well. Suppose that you were in a neighborhood in Seattle, Washington, a rather wealthy neighborhood, or pretty well off, and you were taking a survey of how much money people make there. All right, so you knock on the first door and say, "Good afternoon, I'm such and such, and I'm taking a survey of incomes in this neighborhood." Of course, in real life, people would say it's none of your business. Slam the door in your face, but play along with me here for a minute. So suppose the first people say, well, I think we made $250,000 last year. All right, so the first person, their household income was $250,000. Thank you. Go on to the next door, knock on it. That person says, well, I think we made $280,000 last year. Okay. Knock on the next door, and these people say, well, I think I made $190,000 last year. And the fourth person says, we made $310,000 last year. And then you knock on door number 5, and Bill Gates opens up. And as you all know, Bill Gates is probably the wealthiest person in the world still, or very close to it. And so Bill Gates says, well, I don't know, I think my account said I made $10 billion last year. All right, so 10 billion is way out here. All right, so there's 5 people. And what would be the average income for that neighborhood? Think about that. Just don't add them up, just kind of guess at it. It's going to be around 10 billion for the 5 people, all right? Divide by 5, that's roughly 2 billion. So the average income based on 5 houses is about $2 billion. Now you see how distorted Bill Gates made those numbers, don't you? That's the problem with, I heard a noise, I hope that's not a mouse. Anyway, that's the problem with reporting income, as a matter of fact. When you see income reported in the news media or government reports, it's almost always reported as median income, not the mean income or average income. It's median. So what's the median? Well, the median is when you take the data and you arrange it in order, It can be from high to low or low to high. So for example, this is the lowest, so I'll call that 1. And let's see, this is number 2, that's number 3, number 4, and number 5. So what's the middle piece of data? It's this number right here, 280,000. So the median income for these 5 houses is 280,000, which you probably will agree is a little more realistic. Now we would call something like this an outlier, and there are instances in statistics where statisticians throw out outliers. I saw another one some years ago for a finite math class. I was doing a little bit of statistics in there, and I got some data out of a World Almanac about the birth rate to unmarried women per 1,000 or something like that. And you go through the 50 United States and you have all these numbers, about how many women per 1,000 that are unmarried have children. And then there was the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia was way off the chart. That's Washington, D.C. Now why is that? Well, District of Columbia is Washington, the city of Washington, and it's a very urban area. And it turns out there's a very high birth rate to unwed mothers in Washington, D.C. And there probably is in New York City and Chicago and Columbus and Los Angeles and all other big metropolitan areas. The difference is that the other numbers in that study were states. And states have rural populations and urban populations. There's quite a bit different demographic there. And so, and as it turns out, there are fewer babies born to unwed mothers in the states. But when you look at Washington, D.C., it's very high. So that would be considered an outlier, I think, by most statisticians. They would probably throw out District of Columbia. And it really doesn't belong because it's not a state with the more typical demographics of a state. But anyway, that was talking about outliers. Now back to median. Income is normally reported as median because a few people making a lot of money can greatly distort the average. And so, what's the average household income in this country? I don't know what the number is. Let's suppose it's $35,000, just for sake of argument. So here's $35,000. Now, how far below $35,000 can you get? You can only get down to 0 from $35,000, but how much higher than $35,000 can you get? All the way out to Bill Gates, right? So in that case, these ones way out here, there's my finger, really distort the average and would in that case make it much higher, just like this would. Housing prices are usually reported as median also. So I'm not sure what the number is right now, but I know some years ago at Southern State, the mean or average age at graduation was 28 years old at Southern State, but the median was 23. So in other words, if you lined up everybody graduating at Southern State in order by age, the middle person would be about 23 years old. But the average is higher, around 28 years old. It's because you can't get very far below 23 and still go to college, but you can get much older than 23 and still go to college. So that too distorts it on one side. So median is used to help describe the center of data, the central tendency of data, without regard to some major distorting factors that would distort the mean or average. So anyway, that's where you see median. Now, there's a huge disadvantage to using the median in statistics. It's because there's no formula for median. There's only a process for finding it, but there's no mathematical formula. Therefore, there is no way to use it in any theorem. So we can't compute with the median. All we can do is just describe data with it. All right, so that's a measure of central tendency.